Ladies and gentlemen, this is an article that came out December 9th, 2017 in the Times. And I will leave the link to this article in the description box. U.S. farmers lose their heirs to opioid plague. American farmers have long dealt with droughts, tornadoes, and floods. They now face a new scourge, a cataclysmic wave of drug overdoses. As a young man, Roger Weinmiller, 60, who grows corn and soybeans on 3,400 acres in Wayne Township, Ohio, had dreams of leaving a share of the family farm to his three children. Then, in March last year, his daughter, Heather Himes, died of an opioid overdose at their farmhouse. Mr. Weinmiller found her collapsed in the bathroom, a syringe by her side. She was 31. Months later, his eldest son, Eugene, 37, also overdosed and died. I call it the devil's drug, Mr. Weinmiller said of heroin. It's like a monster living within him. The monster is savaging the country. About 64,000 people died of drug overdoses in the U.S. last year, a rise of more than 20% on 2015 and more deaths than the U.S. suffered during the Vietnam War. Opioid abuse is estimated to have cost 500 billion in 2015. Wow, equivalent to nearly 3% of the GDP. Addiction is often thought of as an urban phenomenon. The crack cocaine crisis of the 1980s is remembered as having ravished Los Angeles and New York. In the 1940s, heroin was used by metropolitan jazz musicians. Today, though, the opioid plague is tearing through the rural America, where countless small towns have been picked apart by the rise of industrial scale agriculture. A survey released by the American Farm Bureau Federation and the National Farmer Union showed that three-quarters of American farmers and workers have been directly affected by opioid abuse. No other group appears to have been worse hit. Mr. Weinmiller's sole surviving child, also named Roger, 35, has also battled addiction. He started with pain pills but graduated to heroin, which is far cheaper, to starve off the debilitating dope sickness or the withdrawal symptoms that hit addicts when high fades. Mr. Weinmiller fears his son is incapable of taking on the farm. He keeps putting off estate planning. He doesn't have his life together yet. As he stands, my son is not management material. He said that's because his son is still doping. John Shade, the police chief in Jackson Township, Ohio, said he's seen too many families wiped out by drugs. A lot of people who were in line to get nice things are gone. Mr. Weinmiller thinks that Americans must stop. Um, what he's pretty much saying is, you know, he wants this whole thing recognized as a disease. But, just hearing that, it always takes me back to crack cocaine. During that era, everybody was a criminal. If you were the user or the drug dealer, you were a criminal. But now it's a mental illness, it's a disease, it's this, it's that. It's just so many excuses. But see, these reasons that they're given is never going to stop the addiction. Rather than a failure of willpower, the bottom line, he says, the country needs more love and understanding. Yeah, I wonder where that love and understanding was during the crack epidemic. Just asking. Tom Vilsack served as agriculture secretary to President Obama, who gave him responsibility for tackling the opioid plague. He said two factors have fueled the plague. The physical nature of farm work often leads to injury. And starting in the 1990s, doctors were urged, even given incentives by the drug companies, to prescribe powerful opioid painkillers. It wasn't only farm laborers who fell into the trap. High school football players, cheerleaders who injured themselves have often been prescribed painkillers. For many, it was the first step on a road to hell. Over tens of thousands of people hooked on pills turned to heroin, which is now being edged out by fentanyl, a synthetic opioid that is about 50 times stronger. The grim irony is that the companies that produce the pain pills and who asserted that they were not addictive, um, are now producing medicines like Suboxone, designed to wean addicts off of opioids. We see, but you know what? Big Pharma is going to make money no matter what, ladies and gentlemen. They're going to make the Narcan, and they're going to make any other drug, methadone, that they can give to the addict. So, like I said, for them, it's a win-win situation. They win whether they're providing the opioids, and they win because they're the providers of the Narcan. They can't lose in this whole thing. They got everything rigged up where they make money no matter what. You pay them getting into the problem, you pay them getting out of the problem. He got that right, Mr. Vilsack said. And he's right. They can't lose. He also pointed out that rural populations have fell, which has hit local businesses hard. Farming is always a precarious life at the mercy of the elements, and small manufacturers based in rural areas have struggled to adapt to the globalized economy. Assessing drug addiction treatment could be all but impossible if your life was a mess. You didn't have a car and you lived out in the sticks, he said. Many people have left, and those who remain face higher unemployment, higher poverty rates, poor health care. Basically, their tomorrow's not going to be any better than their today. Rural police are stretched thin. Dennis Lowe, a veteran narcotics officer who works in Fairfield, Hocking, and Athens counties in Ohio, sees fentanyl sourced from China being distributed by Mexico linked cartels. A user can ask for a delivery to be made in the countryside, making drugs far more easily accessible than treatment. The dealers can purchase a kilo of fentanyl from China for a few $1,000s and turn it into $1 million or more on the streets. It's a national security issue, Commander Lowe says. America's rural hinterland has long played a second billing to the big cities on the coast, but this flyover country carries political heft. Trump won the White House largely because of its support. Mr. Vilsack is scathing, however, when asked about Trump's response to the opioid plague. The White House has declared a public health emergency, which comes with no guarantee of additional federal funds. Trump already said there will be no funding. If they want funding, they have to apply for the grants that they already have in place. He's not going to pour any money into this thing. Congress has not displayed the urgency witnessed when Florida and Texas were hit by hurricanes this autumn. But that's different. A disaster is far different from a drug addiction. I don't know if it's right to even compare the two. The drug addiction is ongoing, and that's really a personal thing that a person is doing, where a national disaster like a hurricane, that just happens here and there. It's not one of those ongoing things. You know what I mean? It's really not the same. And the national disaster impacts people losing property and their businesses, where the drug addiction directly affects the person that's doing the drugs. I don't know if that's a fair comparison. I know where he's going with it, but I don't know. I don't fully agree with what he's saying in there. Mr. Vilsack said, there's a phrase people use in the country, all hat, no cattle. Okay. Well, a lot of people are upset with Trump for not going through with declaring this as a national emergency. But like I said, if they would have done that, America would literally go under. It just can't afford all that money pouring into all the states. It would be billions and possibly even $1 trillion. But please tell me what you think. Please leave your comment and subscribe, and don't forget to hit on that notification bell. Peace, family.